evening, Sensei.
Hello. Let me just spotlight for everyone. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Let me put this down for now. Whew. Okay. Now let me see if I can. Just want to start with, we haven't done this in a while, just go over some of Sensei's words. The yearly anniversary of his passing is coming up pretty quick in Shingu. I don't know exactly how it was in Tokyo, but it was pretty major event. Okay, so every year around this time, you kind of feel the energy, at least I do, I feel the energy kind of picking up. So, this is from the Secret Teachings. In response to universal ki, nature came into existence. In Shinto cosmology, the various powers of nature are symbolized by deities such as the 8 dragon kings, the 5 male, 3 female gods, etc. Okay, now right there, he actually goes into something pretty important because he uses terminology that is very much from the Japanese Shinto. Okay. But in response to universal ki, response to the movement of something, nature came into existence. So physical existence, nature came out of something. Here he says universal ki, and it's a translation. So I'd like at some point to look at the Japanese. I usually talk to Linda Holiday, Barry Heine Sensei, or Lauren Harris Sensei about the Japanese. Okay, so we have, anyway, person just joined named Stacy, so if that is you, sometimes the name on the monitor is not your name. But anyway, we're going to be reading from the Secret Teachings. Aikido is Odo no Kamo Waza. If you are linked to the void and emptiness, the vibrating patterns of the universe will be reflected on your inner mirror. Let's go over that again. Aikido is Odo no Kamo Waza. Now that's an old term. As far as I know, they came out of the Japanese Shinto, the Kojiki. So he throws that term out after he says that nature, everything in nature came out of universal ki. And he kind of threw a couple of terms out as ways of kind of charting the movement of that. And so he goes into Aikido is Odo no Kamo Waza. And then he goes into maybe a bit of a teaching, okay? If you are linked to the void and emptiness, the vibrating patterns of the universe will be reflected on your inner mirror. An interior. Misogi is kind of getting or clearing out, not getting rid of, because that's kind of like got to throw it out, but clearing. Allowing the inner mirror to reflect the vibrating patterns of the universe. in some sense, he talks about an echo. So the same vibrating patterns of the universe potentially exist in here. It's the mirror. Initially, what we call the eye tends to distort nature. We have our own perceptions of things, which are very individual, some of which that's good, but collectively it can be very limiting. So misogi, term he uses a lot, he didn't throw that out in this particular section I'm reading, is to clear out the unproductive patterns of the I, ego, whatever. So this becomes a mirror and it reflects the vibrating patterns of the universe. Okay? And he says here is a practical example. An opponent comes walking toward you. If you are spiritually sensitive to his vibrations, you can read him completely even before you see his form. With good IQ, you can instantly sense an opponent's movement and deftly avoid any attack. If an opponent appears right now, you must be ready. There is no room for error. This is Odo no Kamuwaza. And that last part. Now, I would surmise the hard thing is whether an opponent appears or whether opponent doesn't. There are those vibrating patterns of the universe. There's the clearing out of the I, misogi. Misogi is a very broad term. There's ritual practices in Shinto with cold water and everything like that. There's the chanting of syllables and sounds. There's deep meditation. So there are many forms of misogi. Aikido training, not just learning the movement, but perceiving the patterns of vibrating energy that the movements are based upon. That's also misogi in my mind. Especially when the anniversary of the founder's passing, April 26th. He passed on April 26, 1969. And so, to some degree, we acknowledge that every year. And for me, the actual pace of things, the energy movement of things, tends to pick up at that time. And not translating these words, but again, the whole sense of it. Vibrating patterns of energy. Nature, our perception of what's going on. Perceiving things at a finer level. That coming from an interior place, the mirror, means clearing out a lot of the noise, the I. And so that's something I think that he stressed. He really talked a lot about building a better world and things like that, because I think in some sense, if you get too involved in the finer of it, you lose touch with this world. And this world is also potentially a mirror of a much finer, in his words, a more divine model. And so, and it's very easy to get caught up in what's going on. What's going on right now in the world is not good. The environment is being ignored. Our country is seeming to move more towards a fascist nature. So we've been there, but there's war. There's war in the Ukraine. There's war on the interior, trying to deal with all that. So, creating a more beautiful world. What the outer world is, my thought, is behavior. But all behavior comes from what's inside. If you want to fix the behavior there, you have to fix what's perpetuating that behavior here, whether you're pro this or con this. And part of that's the misogi. There's probably a natural accord to things, a balance, a harmony, wago. Well, Sensei talked about wago, not so much heiwa. Wago is an accord, it's a balance, it's harmony. Heiwa is oftentimes translated as peace. And a lot of times Aikido, the art of peace, the actual word was not peace. Heiwa, it's wago. So there's a natural accord. The universe has a natural accord with itself, unity. It moves, it vibrates, it changes. But all within that, there's a natural accord it has with itself. We come out of the universe. So we potentially have the blueprint of that natural accord here. What happens is that there's the world of I and the world of human behavior. And so if we want to fix that, I mean, yeah, there's the potential of working through political systems and things like that. But I think what Sensei was saying was we start here. The training itself. The training itself. Boom, 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 boom. So anyway, with that in mind, we'll kind of get up and we'll kind of move. Yeah, that's me. Okay, so today I'm going to start with, now I'm going to use this. This is a 3-section spear. It's comes from this is a replica of it, but the original 3-section spear was wielded by Izanami, archetypal male, female, on this place called the Floating Bridge of Heaven. And they stirred the heavenly brine, and the drops fell off the spear, congealed into the islands of Japan. So one way of reading that is symbolic of physical creation. That in a finer place there was a universal masculine, feminine that somehow was united through the spear represents a lot, possibly even the attraction, the harmony, the accord, the love between A and B. And around was unformed. So you could call it the heavenly brine or the chaos of what's going on. And it came together through the interaction of A and B. And those drops started the creation of form. Remember what Sensei just said. The universe is vibrating patterns of energy. Everything comes out of universal ki, and that goes into what he calls nature. So the floating bridge, and that's a tricky one. Maybe anytime you have a balance between two forces, a space is created for those forces to potentially come together. And the coming together of the forces is probably a natural attraction. See, Sensei talks about love. And of course, love exists on a human level. But for those forces, it was kind of the attraction, the magnetism, the gravity that brought them together in a sort of harmony. And therefore, what happens here? Stirring up the heavenly brine, congealing into the islands of Japan. So you can read that in Aikido, as everything is out of the movement of, ki, and Edo Sensei thought was universal ki. Now, these are movements, but you can say they're vibrating patterns of energy. Vibrating patterns of energy. Okay? And I thought I'd do a little bit. We have a 30 movement set, but the last third of it is more around what I call, just the gateway to, what I call the takemusu level. Okay? Takemusu. Boom. Izanagi, Izanami joined together and mutually held that spirit of it. Stirred up things, brought into existence, as we know it, the islands of Japan, physical creation. Oh. Okay. So the bringing together of those forces in harmony to create, from my mind anyway, gives birth to takemusu. Take, older reading of Bu, martial arts, Budo, way of Bu. Musu, an older reading of Umu, to give birth to create. So, takemusu aiki is really that act of creation, the bringing into being up. Okay, so Izanami joined by, and you could call the spirit itself a vehicle for that symbolizes the attraction of these two things and vibrating patterns of energy. In Aikido, they become manifest in physical forms. They're based upon that. And creation, that motion. Well, that motion is both an up and a back, or conversely, that motion is preceded by an intention. The intention was brought into being by a movement of the vibrating forces. Okay, boom. Now that movement can split into two. That movement can split into two. That movement can split from 2 to 4, from 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 32, boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. So you have a map of how ki moves in creation. Okay, now the problem is, what do I do? So there's a learning process. So we generally go through forms. Okay, so what I'm going to do right here, I'm going to start from movement number 20. Now, one of the things is that you may not have this. I caution against, I'm going to carve my own because it gets dangerous. Okay, so you can do this without something sharp at the end. That's for a moment. Use this. When I hold the staff, I always think spear. That's a strike. That's a strike. This penetrates. This cuts. Boom, boom, boom. So for me, I get confused when I hold in the middle. What's that? What's the sharp end? Oh, I just found out. So the long end is the sharp end. I hold kind of on the, let's say, the 2/3. I'm holding a shorter staff because you hold a regular length when you might smash something. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Some movements like that. Vibrating field of energy. Okay, difficult to deal with, so we just take it from a level of form. So I'm in the right foot back position. Thumbs face. This is the movement number 20, goes to movement 21. A step forward. Boom. Somebody on this end is potentially coming at you. All right, so what you're doing is before they go, da, they go this, before that, you're intercepting it right there. And if this is sharp, they cut. It's different than just going, okay. So, 21. 22 is the pin blade position. Okay? This is the fifth change. Go through first change, second change, third change, fourth change, fifth change. Now this is very much like in body arts. Somebody is coming to stab you. So we go like this, we grab and try to do a movement, but in that moment we grab, if it's sharp, it can come right at us in this form. So here, what you're doing is you're not blocking, but you're redirecting with the blade. Now here, you're turning the sharp point back. Let's go here. Okay? And you can practice it this way. Okay? So we go from here to here to here. Now I catch 23, right, left, cover. Now this is right, left, cover just with the arms, but the hips are also in that motion. The hips are supported not by a rigid sense of ground, but by a fluid sense of ground. 22, 23, cover, 24, step back with the right foot, 25, the long end goes down from the top, the right hand takes them down, and step back. Okay. Step back. Step back again. And we just executed the first what I call the fire water changes. But Shibo Sensei used those terms a lot. It's just my own terminology. Upper hand, fire, lower hand, water. And what happens then is you start to do some of the circular things if you watch him with this, and then you watch the students and they do that. It's very interesting. Back. Long end, holding with the left, goes down. Right hand takes from the top. Now, you catch with the left, step back with the left foot. Okay, now, we did this change, which was come down from the top. All we're doing is the same change, except it's going to be in a different dimension. Like a helicopter. The long end goes all the way around. I take, catch with the left. Now from here, careful inside, full sweep. Full sweep. Step, turn, cut. Not big strike, I think cut. Rotate the hip. Thumbs face. Now, right hand grabs, thumbs face away, thumbs face, step back. Okay? And as it is, I'm thinking about this, for example, we go boom, 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 boom. That's a form with a sequence, okay? You despise how much effort it is for me to do that. Because for me, it's much more natural. It's just allow the more vibrating patterns of energy. You know, the A to B, boom, creating, moving, shifting. But we have that, okay? But what it's supposed to do is, you learn the individual movements. Now, here we get the first of the fire water changes. And we turn around, and then we execute that same change over the head. Now, full circle sweep, careful inside. Now, boom, turn, thumbs face. Tip is back already, thumbs face away, thumbs face, and you're back. So you're learning a sequence. But figure eight, boom. Figure eight, boom. 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 Now what I just did is just took those basic, like musical notes. They have a chord structure to them, and I'm just improvising with Okay. Now, for example, here, that's a fire water change, and we're moving into a basic set of forms, but right about here. And I'm reversing the grip here, and just going fire water change. Now I'm going to go reverse fire water change. Okay. And a lot of these, for example, we go here. This is like that last movement. Back to here. Boom, boom, boom. And am I planning the movements? Well, I have a knowledge of the structure, but the knowledge of the structure, again, since I was talking about the mirror itself and the vibrating patterns of the universe. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. I'm not sure I'm repeating, but for me, the movements themselves are. I want to clear the eye away, so I'm not in other words. There's movement out there, but the reflection of that movement is in here. There's a beat, an echo. So when I do this active, I'll pause it for just a little bit. So, any questions about that? That's, I mean, that's a bit more advanced. On the other hand, gotta start somewhere. Anything?
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
That I haven't asked before.
Yeah.
So, as we've discussed on several occasions, the 30 movement misogi ends in a different place than it begins. And I'm just wondering, like, when you finish the 30 movement misogi, do you often just continue on in an improvisatory manner? Like, you have played the theme of the jazz piece and now it's time to improvise over the chords? Or how do you approach, that ending and transition and phase shift?
Well, I think it was Audrey. She said something once. She said, I have trouble with the next move. And my answer to that was, there is no next move. And what it is a little bit, sometimes, okay, you go from this level to that level to that level. And, to some degree, it's a progression. Okay? And, this kind of more of a TV mythology, but Sheldon Cooper on The Big Bang Theory, they have an offshoot, young Sheldon, and he's doing college level plus work when he was in middle school. It's this comedy, and it's just built upon, the first show, which was Big Bang. Then he goes to college as a really young kid because he's too bright. He's driving everybody nuts. And he's smarter than everybody there. Okay? So the question is, it's all scripted, right? When did you start getting smart? Well, he was different from when he first started. So in terms of what you're talking about, it has more to do with who you are. And when you learn a set, okay, even that set, which I like, it's sort of, it was a composite of about 3 that I know. And there's certain things about the 30 movements that would go into the first change, the second change, the third change, the fourth change, the fifth change. We go into the fire water change. We go into, the double figure 8. Okay, then we also, and so that gives you tools. And so at that point, I guess the question is, when did that start for me? I don't know, I go to these workshops my first year that Robert Frazier and Robert Nadeau senseis would teach. They were both personal students of O Sensei. And they would show not videos, they exist, and they were all home movies that were shot of, and they were priceless, right? Eventually they were gathered by a man named Stan Pranin, and he kind of, kind of preserved them. They weren't just like home movies that were getting worse and worse from wear and tear. And then, now they're videos, and then, now you can watch just about every one of them on YouTube. Okay? But I would watch him do the staff, and I learned some beginning sets, but I was always kind of messing around with it. Not necessarily something the teachers particularly cared for. And when I went to Japan to study, the head of the school was Hikizuchi Sensei, who, of the ones that, that I saw, okay, he kind of had the beginnings of some of the circular stuff, but he didn't teach it past a certain level, okay? And so, he's invited over here. Actually, he spent May of 1974 here in Northern California. In fact, he spent it at my parents' house in Santa Cruz. And so one day, he comes out and, he actually bought gifts for me and Mary Heine Sensei and some of the teachers that were here. He taught the long staff, not the Joe, but a longer one called a bow. Right? I tend to use, because I work inside a lot, much shorter. Okay. And so one day, so staying at my parents' house, says, okay, get your staff, which is the one he brought for me. So I brought it out. They were awkward length because, you could get cases for staff, but they were all Joe length. And so I would put it in that. And then I had a Japanese towel, ceremonial towel. Again, I wrapped it there. And he didn't like that, but he wound up, but anyway, I get my staff. And he just said, he sort of got the divine word, just put it, that he was supposed to pass on to me something very vital about the staff. And so what happens is he goes into the backyard of my parents' house, just off of 41st Avenue. All right, he kind of goes and does kind of what he calls mother ritual, so he does some sounds. And he says, okay, now you go out there and you stand. Now I'm out there, I am just kind of dumb and I don't know what to do. And he just says, well, now move. He's doing more complex forms, not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is sort of based a little bit on what he did. But what happened is I'm just, I don't know what to do. It's like, well, he taught a basic set. He called it at the time, his Bojutsu, long staff technique, Ikkyo, first set. So I said, just do Ikkyo. And so I kind of did a kind of sheepish mechanical version of that. He said, it's done. And I said, what's done? When are you going to start teaching? He said, it's done. So as far as I could tell, but apparently a lot of the Wada Sensei taught, he didn't teach you all these changes. What he did, if it's what Hikitsuchi Sensei did, he opened a gateway, had me stand in it. Initially, I was, but what happens is Hikitsuchi Sensei went back to Japan after a month. I was totally exhausted because I drove him most everywhere. It was a very close living situation when he stayed with you. And so what I would do is I would go out to that place and I'd take my staff and it would start to move. It would just start to move. Okay? And so, it was a couple of months I had, and I actually was supposedly going, traveling to grad school abroad. I'd been offered a full PhD fellowship grant, but it was abroad. And I was going to stop by, in Japan, revisit Shingu, where I trained, and then go there. But what happened is, so I had a couple of months before I embarked upon that great journey, so to speak. And I would just go there, and the staff I didn't understand it. It's just staff would move, and the staff would move, and the staff would move, and the staff would move, okay? And, I learned maybe a couple other sets, Aikido, stick work. But I always did that. In fact, I was doing that before Hikitsuchi Sensei did whatever he did, okay? And so, what I found is, initially, if I tried to do it and I wasn't standing in that place that he opened up, staff would move. But in a very short time, wherever I was, the energies would gather and kind of organize. And so the staff would move when I wasn't there, right? That's the whole thing. I mean, you have a shrine, but you want to make yourself, put the shrine inside you, okay? And the shrine is a place where the kami, the energies gather, all right? A space for them. But ultimately, you kind of want to be, the term in Japanese is ikimiya. Miya is an older word for shrine, which also has a connotation of center. You want to be kind of like a living version of that. And so what happened is, I went back to Japan and he used to do all these things. And what's really funny about that is because, everybody get lost because he would change, he wouldn't get attached to a particular form. And so he would, but I found that after he did that, I could follow his changes, which were not that complex. It's just everybody was wedded to bam, 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 bam. So when he did certain movements, if I can remember certain things, and basically what I did is you have this motion, all right? And you go this way, you go 1, 2, 3, okay. So all I did was just say, okay, 1 and 2, or 1 and 2, and go 1, 2, 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and. And to add some of the stuff, the fire water channels. And if we go back to this is the sharp point. As I said, be careful. Okay, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this. No, work with the regular staff. See, if certain movements like this, that's kind of, so you, so I've been doing this for almost as long as I've been doing Aikido. Okay. So the thing about it is that, the actual initial movements, for example, the thrust, just the basic taisavaki is important. In other words, but you see, you're rotating the hip, you're getting off the line. So the first part of the 30 move step is important. And for example, here, when that's a striking motion, no, so we're doing the same taisavaki. Boom. Boom, boom, boom. Now, right here, I could stab myself, but I'm getting a sense where all of a sudden something's coming at me. I can adapt and, okay, or try to, anyway. So, my advice, you don't lose the beginning step. And, of the 30 movements, or ones 21 to 30, are the ones that I tend to emphasize kind of with myself, and I just, okay. Anyway, did that answer your question at all? In other words, basically, you got to give yourself permission to respectfully mess around. Okay?
Yes, Sensei, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's in everything. Okay? I was watching a video that Stephen Curry posted about basketball. He's kind of doing some basic stuff, and now he says, now I'm going to do something that your coaches don't like. And so he's dribbling the ball, and he bounces it off the wall, takes it back and bounces it off the wall. And he says, your coaches won't like that. Why? Because you're going to try that stuff. No, just work your basic, whatever. High school coaches are probably, unless they're special, are probably horrible in terms of really letting you stretch. And so, he's there, bounce it off the wall, catch it, and he's in it, and then bounces off the wall. And so, how do you get that good? Well, he had his initial instruction. I'm sure a coach, could explain how to do dribble. But when he was messing around, probably from a very young age, okay, creative. So, that area right there is a hard one. Okay. It's a hard one. It really is. Because, if you don't. See, also says use. If you kind of look at his sword work, his sword work is much more basic that way. Because, you have this move, you have that move. You can't do a lot of this stuff with a sword. But the way that his body changes with the sword comes off the spear. A lot of Aikido these days, you have entering, you have turning, okay? But, even the first part of the 30 movements, somebody's coming and saying, oh, okay. Okay, so then the second set they introduce, movements 2 through 4, and then the last one, there's the fifth change. So I think I learned probably the first 3 changes. Hikizuchi Sensei taught. And changes 4 and 5, there's a man named Kato who kind of also thought similarly. We didn't get along past a certain level because, it's like, this is what you do. No. What I'm going to be doing is, in a certain amount of time, it's going to be very different, but possibly connected to what you're doing. But the 5th change, I sort of got. There's a 6th change, but with the staff, I never used it. So, and so, the area right there where there's movement. The way I was going to say put it, universal key goes into nature. The movement of energy, the design of the creation in its original sense, perfect, loving, harmonious. When the sensei says create a better world, all he's just saying, my sense. Get back to a clearer sense of who you are, so the interior of you starts to have some of that original sense of the perfection. He talked about the universe, but the universe was the creation. And that's constant. It's not like, I got it. Okay, and so the movements, it should get a little bit more original. You're looking at, the micro of, the thrusting motion, which is not just that, but it's, you're off the line. You're off the line. Movements are what gets you off the line, and the turning of the hips gets you, supplies some of the power of the motion. Any one of those moves, is almost like it's you could write a PhD thesis on it. Did I know that when I was fooling around? But no, I kind of, it's just something that over a period of time, if it gets your attention, you respectfully study it by messing around with it. And if you don't do that, you just get caught up in patterns. These days you get caught up in the pattern of being a Republican. you know, or a Russian soldier. Those are unproductive patterns. I'm, you know, trying to be apolitical, but, you know, okay. But the martial arts are funny. Bruce Lee was somebody who took, you know, the basic Wing Chun, and all of a sudden, you know, he was improvising off of it, right? Found out he was too programmed, right? Boom, 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 boom. So the body changes or the hand changes. One's Izanagi, one's Izanami, one's fire, one's water. And then, you know, you take that into your basic Aikido movements. See, we start with this, but you have to wonder, for example, Sensei, who is he training with? Well, yeah, I mean, at some point, you know, he trained with Takeda Sensei and the other people that tell him about their arts. But after a while, he was pretty much just teaching class. So I think he did a lot of research with, you know, the sword and the spear, but initially we see Aikido as a movement of the sword up and down, but as you keep going, you begin to see Aikido as a movement of the spear. And through the movement of the spear and other things also, did a lot of spiritual practice. He started to get a sense of the vibrating fields of energy. Universal key. The universe on the design is not just physical. Universe of matter, energy, space-time, the universe of design, which comes through intention, and was brought into being through causality. Those are big words. But, you know, if we kind of go into the difference between Sensei's Aikido and what everybody else is doing, it's probably has some merit to it. Anyway, and what I'd like to do, so we went through, you know, just, you know, this you get by messing around respectfully. No one gives you permission to do this. Okay? And so, I thought we'd do the last couple of minutes is vibrating fields of energy. Since they did a lot of work with sound. So, join me if you like. I'd recommend, if you don't want to be on camera, mute. Okay? So right hand, left hand here. First sound is SU. Su. Apparently, all sense everything comes out of Su. Represents kind of like a universal space, pure beingness, original consciousness. Subtle, but Su goes to U. Su. And when Su goes to U, I actually add the lower hand. Su. Su. Now, Su. Su to U goes to all. Su. And what we're doing there is tracing a counterclockwise circle, but we're doing it by going right first and then coming back. And then A goes to O, which is then leftward. Which is right. It's a clockwise spiral down. So, rightward, up, leftward, O, down. Okay. Okay. And just the beginning, Su to U. A to O goes back to U. So there's that second O, second U, Su to U, A, O, U. Then there's E, E. I go leftward first. E. What did Do Sensei? What Sensei like? Re, E, G. The whole thing. Okay. Now the on the O, hey, it's a mythological place. Izanagi don't have to go that way. That's just what we picture it. Stirring up the heavenly brine. Bringing it into being the islands of Japan, which is physical creation. Forms a plus sign or a cross, if you will, right there. Let's do it once more. Anyway, unmute, if you will. Cliff, anything on that? That apparently was a major chant that O-sensei did. It was a Su chant. Anything?
I feel kind of balanced. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, for me, actually, if I kind of go into it, just kind of like the everyday world, just get dragged into it. I feel this is cleaned out a bit. I got all my human judgments and pressures. feel clearer, feel somewhat transparent. So that's kind of a precursor to that mirror. Movement of the body, boom, boom, is focused. Boom, boom, boom. Now, Sensei did other things, though. When we're going to, this is part of the class on Sunday, we're going to somewhat celebrate O Sensei's passing, so I'll be doing some more formal chanting. Okay? But anyway, any other questions? We have a guest today. If you feel like chiming in, feel free. Okay. Well, I don't know how this sound will record, because oftentimes, when you can't do it on Zoom, you do a prolonged note and all of a sudden the sound disappears. There's a setting called Keep Original Sound, which disappeared on my device. Okay, so let's just see how it turns out. Anyway, I think we're going to call it for today. So thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, Sensei.
Take care.